Welcome to the Rebel Rise podcast, a place where badass women like you come to connect, learn, and grow. Here, we celebrate the relentless spirit of women who dare to dream and design their own destinies. This is your time for no bullshit, so no subject is off limits. This is a time for you to collect inspiration and create the vision for your life. Get ready to break free from societal expectations, take your power back, and step into your dream life. Your empowerment journey begins right here. Let's go. Of the Rebel Rise podcast, we have my friend Danni Dymova, and I am so excited to chat with you today. I know you're going to have so much value for everybody, and we are discussing all things health, wellness, mental health, all of the things, and I can't think of a better person to have this discussion with today because, Danni, you've had so many backs and forths with this. And we were just chatting before we started to record, right, about how you're in this journey of like restarting again, which is awesome. That's also kind of the space that I'm in as well. So I'm excited to get into this because I know it's something that we all struggle with. So first, let me say welcome, Danni. Thanks for joining me on this podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and kind of get into this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to discuss this again. And we talked about it earlier already, but can you start by telling everybody just a little bit about you, your passions, and then we'll just kind of get into the journey.
Yeah. So my name is Danni Dymova. I am 25 years old and I live in Chicago. I am the field marketing manager for Steezy, so I do run the entire state for field marketing. Cannabis is probably one of my biggest passions in life. I've been around it since I was a child, and I feel like it has severely improved my quality of living and the quality of living for people around me. So that is something that is very, very important to me, and that is why I'm working for Steezy. I think mental health is also something that kind of falls into that. I went to school at ASU. I got my degree online in psychology, a bachelor's in psychology. So I very much love delving into mental health stuff and like the journey of what needs to be done to become a better version of yourself. I work out. I have a dog and a cat. And that's kind of the little snippet about me. It's kind of hard to talk about yourself.
Yeah, it is, especially when I don't give you a lot of context. I'm like, just share something about yourself, right? So obviously, like that's all really great for them to know and to have a little bit of background so that they can connect to you. And I know a huge part of your journey, you know, not only is working in the cannabis industry, but also your own mental health journey and learning to find balance and to properly care for yourself. And we were talking about earlier how we get in these habits that we know make us feel really good. And then these little things that happen that kind of throw us off that path. And then we have to kind of do this mental check-in with ourselves, right? Where we're like, all right, it's time to get off your butt and like go do something, like let's get off our ass, like let's go. And so for a while, like you hit a really strong stride. And I know you've done that a couple times and you're picking up your stride again. So can you talk just a little bit about that piece of your journey to start and how that started to help you with your mental health?
Yeah. I think I just want to like kind of preface, like I'm a very structure oriented person. So when my schedule changes even a little bit, it definitely screws with my mental health. And I think that that's what triggers me to fall off of these like patterns that I'm creating for myself that are healthy patterns, right? So like getting a new job was like that initial switch, and I was trying to keep up with the gym and I was trying to keep up with everything that was helping me, but I couldn't because I was working weird hours. I was getting adjusted to the flexibility of a new schedule and just the new responsibilities that were under my belt. So I, for the last probably 3 months, have not been working out. I decided that I needed to pause on that because I was losing weight dramatically when I started my new position. And that was partially because I was like out and about in the field all the time. And being a pescatarian, what are you going to eat when you're always on the road, you know, like you're not going to put food in the car, it's going to get gross and then you're going to get sick. Eating out all the time gets expensive. If you're eating good food, eating crappy food makes your stomach hurt. So it's just like, and it affects your mental health. It's like a cycle, an endless cycle. So I started prioritizing my eating over the last few months. So I've been eating 3 times a day, which has been very, very huge for me. I've always had a very difficult relationship with food, not necessarily because I want to be skinny or anything of that sort, but more so because if something doesn't sound good, I just don't want it. So, kind of working through some of those restrictions with food has been helpful. And I thought back to like what has helped me in the past, which for a lot of the time it was journaling, just taking a couple minutes in the morning, a couple minutes at night, nothing crazy, and then working out. For me in the past, I always put very like tough goals on myself where like I had to be in the gym 5 days a week or I had to do it this and this way, and that wasn't working. I wasn't giving myself the grace that I needed. um so I'm just, you know, trying to give myself a new goal. 3 days a week, 30 minutes a day, an hour and a half a week of exercise. That's it. Like, whatever that looks like. If it's going to the gym, if it's going on a bike ride while it's nice in Chicago, if it's going swimming, you know, just
Yeah.
being active. Because I will fall into these ruts where I'm just like trying to get dopamine constantly and I'm just like doom scrolling or I'm sitting and watching TV, and like that's not helpful for anybody. And like getting yourself up off your ass when you're in that rut is really hard. So it's like, when do you stop giving yourself grace and say, all right, get up and do this shit? So that was kind of my push a few months back, and I decided I was going to do it step by step, focusing on food and now reintroducing exercise little by little along with journaling. I'm also looking into meditation. That's something that was really, really helpful for me in the past. And I know there's a few apps, so I'm looking into waking up right now to see if that's something I want to do. They have like little theory videos, and then it goes along with like a practice, and it's like a 28-day kind of thing to get you into it. Um, so I feel like those have been like the most impactful things for my mental health recently. I was seeing a therapist, and it wasn't really helping me too much. I did a lot of that like internal work as a young adult and a teen, and I'm still a young adult. But I guess more so young adult, like, you know, 19, 20. And I've kind of figured out what those triggers are and what the trauma is, and it's more so like, you know, finding ways to keep myself balanced on a day to day now. And I know what does that for me. It's just keeping in those habits was always tough because I was setting such tough goals for myself.
Yeah, and I love that you just ended with that, this setting tough goals for yourself, because I think we all do that. We all have this tendency to set this bar so high. Yeah, and to be really just tough on ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
when we don't hit that goal, we're like, oh, and we like get down on ourselves, and that can also affect our mental health. So I'm glad that you're kind of switching it up a little bit, and you're exploring re-entering the routine that you had before in a different way, because it's really easy for us to be hard on ourselves about the routine. Like,
Yeah.
I know for myself, I felt like I had to be in a very specific, very rigid routine all the time, especially being in the self development industry. Because you hear everybody say, like, oh, you have to have a routine. I get up at 5 a.m. and
Yeah.
I go run, and then I come back and I meditate. And their whole morning process is like 4 hours long.
Yeah.
They're successful entrepreneurs. And so for a long time, I thought I had to have this really regimented morning routine, even evening routine, to make sure I was checking all of these boxes. And like, yes, those are all super important things to be successful with anything you want to do, or even if it's just about your mental health, right? But what I found is you don't have to do everything,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to be everything all at once. And it can be the things that just feel good. Like, it can just, like, you don't have to have like a deep reason. Well, I got to do this because of this, and I got to do this
Yeah.
because of this. Like, we can literally just wake up and say, what feels good to me today? Right? Like, this morning, I have coffee every single day, and I never drink energy drinks. I did not have coffee today, but you know what I do have? I have an energy drink. I don't know why. I felt like that was what I wanted today, and I'm enjoying it, and it's fine, right? I'm still getting my caffeine, still part of my routine. I, still sat outside and got some sun with my morning, but
Yeah.
it's literally like, here's my, for me at least, here's my little grab bag of all these things that I know I enjoy, and what do I want to like pull out of it today? Like, how
Yeah.
do I want to enjoy it? So I love that because you lived in Arizona before. That was how you and I met. You were very disciplined about your focuses when you were here. And then, like you said, things changed. Like your world shifted. You moved back home to Chicago, started a new job. And that's the one thing I really want everybody to hear too from your story. I think you just said a lot of really powerful stuff, but the fact that when your life changes, your routines go to shit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they
I
fall
I
out of
moved I moved back to Chicago. I went through a breakup after being with someone for 3.5 years. I got a new job. Like it was every part of my life was changing. I was talking to my dad again. I had seen him for the first time in like 6 years. So like it was definitely a lot. And like all of that does throw you off. So like I think something that you mentioned, like, checking all the boxes, I think, like, as valuable as social media is, it's also impacted us so much in negative ways. And I think it's partially because we weren't ready as society for that technological advancement when it happened. But like we go on TikTok and we see like my morning routine and she does like a 12 step skincare routine and then goes to the gym and then does Pilates and gets a coffee and I'm like, well, do you work? Like, do you work? Do you have a family? Do you have like what do you do? Do you have a maid? Like, is she cleaning your house? Like, how are you maintaining all of this? Like, checking the box looks different to everybody. For me, checking the box could mean a workout in the morning and a cup of coffee. And for somebody else, their checklist could be just waking up half an hour earlier and laying in bed scrolling on their phone because that's what's helping them wake up. It looks different for everybody. And like, I think that constantly seeing these Instagram reels and these TikTok reels of people having this perfect life is so detrimental to society. Like we have to we like want to be perfect because we're seeing perfectionism constantly, but that's not what it is.
Yeah. So, how would you recommend to people to kind of pull themselves out of that? From coming from somebody who just is pulling themselves out now or has been.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Like I think therapy is huge for everybody. I think that if you haven't done the work, you should definitely seek doing that type of work. Working with a therapist is very different than just venting to your friends about what's going on in your life. You actually put the work in, they give you things to do when you're not in session. And when you come back to session, you're able to work through that. So I feel like step one would be therapy if you haven't already. Um, you've already done that, and that's not helping you because that was the case for me. Go back and think about what did help you in the past when you had to get yourself out of a rut, because chances are this is not the first time you've been in a rut. I feel like people will just cycle through it every couple of years or couple of months or whatever it looks like. So if for me my 5-minute journal is super helpful, maybe for somebody else getting up and walking their dog in a different part of the neighborhood is going to excite them for the day and make them start their day on a positive note. I think that a huge part of getting back into things is trying to shift your perspective. That's like the number one thing. You're not going to be able to do anything if you're constantly sitting here like, I don't want to do it. I can't do it. Okay, great. You can't do it. You don't want to do it. Get up and do it. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. So just like, setting little goals for yourself. Waking up in the morning, what's one thing you're grateful for? One thing you're excited for the day. And then just setting a little goal for yourself, whether that's I'm going to cook myself dinner tonight, or I'm going to call an old friend to catch up, or I'm going to go drop in and see my grandma real quick. Like whatever that looks like, but setting little goals to like push you out of the house, I think is a big thing. People get stuck sitting inside and then they're like, "Oh, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything." So, I think just
Yeah.
little things instead of those big goals, like we were saying. And I will plug everyone on the 5-minute journal, actually. because it's
Uh,
like my second one now, but this is super helpful. The first like 35 pages go through and explain like what the goal of this is. But if you actually get into what the journal looks like, you've got different prompts here. So you've got your morning prompts and your night prompts. And you get a little quote every day. So it'll be like 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things that make today a great day, and then a daily affirmation. I think starting your day with that is huge. I have a hard time like doing it when it's not physically in front of me, which is why I have not been doing it, which is why I got my journal. So like this is the holy grail in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and it's great because you know yourself enough to know, like, I have to have this journal. This journal is what motivates me to actually do the work and to actually go. And I have to use exercises like that too, especially with like the gym. It's easy, especially now that it is so fucking hot
It's
in Arizona.
miserable in Arizona.
It is over 100 degrees. I think it's going to be 111 today. And I don't want to go and sweat more. Like I can sweat just being in one spot. You know what I mean? So it just sounds super miserable to me. But I have these things I put in place like that, right? Where it's like, well, if I don't go today, which is a Sunday, that's okay. I go throughout the week. I just get on my phone. I sign up for classes where I know people I know are going to be that hold me accountable. It helps to like feed my social battery,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And it makes me go and helps me get back into a regular routine.
Yeah.
And I think that we need that sometimes. And if we're waiting for the moment that we are waiting to be motivated to do the journal entry or waiting to be motivated to meal prep or to go to the gym, we're never going to do it because motivation isn't a real thing that's going to stick around with you all the time. Like the motivation actually comes from you doing the work,
Right.
which
It's
is
the discipline. It's self-discipline is what you need.
yes. And as you were talking, I just had this thought where we were just speaking about how we're hard on ourselves and we have these standards until we don't want to do anything. And then it's like you're saying, oh, I don't want to do the work. I'm just going to sit here. I don't feel like it, right? Well, what if we were hard on ourselves in that moment instead? Instead of being hard on ourselves in the moment of like, oh, well, my body doesn't look the way I want it to, or I just, I have these goals and I'm not hitting them, and I want a mansion, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Why don't we have more grace for ourselves there, and then be more tough on ourselves in this moment? Because, like you said, it is those little things. It's those little tiny micro shifts that really make the change. So if
Yeah.
you're like, hey, okay, Vanessa, the three, what is it called? Like the 3 second rule? That's not what it's called, but
It's like
the
the
three,
one,
two,
two,
one,
three, get
go.
up.
Yes. And so, don't sit here and be a little bitch and say how, oh, I'm so tired, whatever.
Yeah.
No, 3, 2, 1, get up and go. Get
Yeah.
up and do the thing. Get on your computer and journal, or get on your 5 minute journal and write something.
Yeah.
Do something for you that makes you feel good. If you're tired, go sit in the sun for a few minutes or whatever. If it doesn't give you more energy, that's great. At least you did it, right?
Yeah.
So that was the thought I just had, is how interesting that it would be if we could just simply flip the script on the things that we are kind of tough on ourselves for. It's
Well,
kind of like
and
a
you know,
tough.
it is that simple. Like as
Yes.
somebody who struggles very, very dramatically, and you can ask any doctor I've seen, any of my friends, any of my family, like I'm very hard on myself. That's just who I am. And yesterday, my schedule kind of got wonky. Like I ended up sleeping in a little bit later because I was exhausted, and I decided I was going to listen to my body. But as a result of listening to my body, I was not able to have time to work out in the morning. So that threw me off, and I was like, well, damn, I didn't do this. Now I don't want to do any of the other stuff. And then I sat down and I was like, that's just a dumb thought to have. Like, you didn't get to do one thing, so now you don't want to do the other 3 things on your to-do list. Like, get up,
Yeah.
and go do it. Just do one of them. And when you do one of them, you'll probably feel better and you'll do the rest. And that's exactly what happened. So like it's like different for everybody. Like some people find motivation in like positive self-talk. Some people find motivation in like, you know, having somebody else to hold them accountable. Some people like that initial motivation when they get back into disciplining themselves. Um, like for some people, setting a 5-minute timer on their phone and being like, once this timer goes off, I have to get up, no more scrolling, I gotta go do my shit. That works for some people. For me, it doesn't work. I'll just keep going through the timer, but it's just finding the things that work for you, I think, is like the most important thing. And
Yes.
definitely those micro shifts, because if you bite off more than you can chew, it's not going to work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I think just exploring and seeing what does work for me. What is motivating to me? What things do I even enjoy?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to force yourself to do all these things because somebody said it.
Right.
Right? Just because Mel Robbins says it or because Gary Vee says it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And that's okay.
Right.
You don't have to do everything the same. And it comes down to, I think, just knowing yourself a little bit better and being honest about that. Like I have my other spare room in my house I had made into a gym during the pandemic. And I was like, this is going to be life changing. It's all I'm going to do. And I never use it. And so I've come to the conclusion that if I'm going to commit to working out, I need to do it at the gym. I
Yeah.
need to go to classes. I need to use the equipment there because I am not motivated to do it here in my home because my home is a relaxing environment. And so when I know that about myself, I can set myself up for success better instead of continuing to make something feel forced because then it's uncomfortable. You don't want to do it. You're absolutely never going to be motivated to do something that you don't like.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I agree. I mean, it's interesting you say that because, like, you mentioned that something that helps you get back into, like, exercising is, like, doing a group class or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like, I couldn't bring myself to do it, like, with people around because I get so nervous. I'm like, well, what if people are judging me? What if people are making fun of me? So, like, for me, it's like actually going to the gym in my building. Like, I don't actually want to go to a public gym. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to go to a class. It makes me uncomfortable. I get anxious. I feel like people are staring at me and judging me, and it's like I'm doing something wrong all the time under a microscope. Whereas when I'm at my home gym, if it's too busy, then I can come back in 20 minutes and see if it's still busy. And if it's not, then I can work out. And I feel like that creates more flexibility. But that's where it's like, it's different for everybody. Like, you need a class, and like, I prefer having exercising be available to me at home. If I had a house, I would probably want like a garage or a room to be for working out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's lots of people are like that. And so I love that we're different in that way because it helps to just illustrate, just know what you want. Like it's okay to want something different from somebody else. Just because it works for them does not mean it works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that you're broken and it doesn't mean that you can't achieve the things that you want to achieve. It's just about, again, getting to know yourself and calling yourself out on your shit. Because for a while when I was telling myself I was going to work out here, I'm lying to myself. Like I already know.
Yeah.
I've lived with myself for 35 years now, so I know myself pretty well. So for me to sit there and say like, yeah, I'm going to go use the weights in there, that's not happening.
Right.
And as far as lifting goes, I would rather do that by myself. It's more comfortable, but also I'm not going to do it. If I walk my ass into the gym, I'm going to do it because I'm already there. Versus here, I'll do like half the reps, half the weight. It's like I don't even try as hard. And so it's just evaluating things like that for yourself as well. You got to call yourself out on your own bullshit sometimes,
Absolutely. If you're not going to hold yourself accountable, no one else is going to.
Right. Right, exactly. And it's a snowball, right? If we're not holding ourselves accountable, we're not understanding what works for us and what doesn't work for us, we never get to that point where we feel good, where we genuinely feel good in our minds, in our bodies. Like I won't even have to lose weight or build muscle in the gym to feel good from working out regularly.
Yeah.
Like I will feel just as good in my body if I'm caring for it regularly versus like if I'm having results. I don't know if that makes sense. And so
no, it does make sense. Because
I
go to the gym not to, lose weight or get stronger or anything like that. I go to the gym because I just want to be healthy and it makes me feel better. It's not because I have some like crazy goal to change my physique or whatnot. It's just to get in there and do it because you feel better after you do it. It's good for your mental health. It's good to get your blood going because when you're going to be 60 years old, you'll still be able to walk around and maybe jump around a little bit. Taking care of yourself long term.
Yeah, yeah, and it really does help with your mental health as well. And I don't know if I've discussed this before on the podcast, but I've certainly identified after having my weight loss that I have some body dysmorphia. Like I still feel like my body looks the same as it did when I was 40 pounds heavier that it does now. And so what I find is I know I'm not moving my body enough, and I know I need to go and move my body when I start to criticize it and I start to want to hide it, because it's like my brain goes back into that place where I wasn't moving my body and I wasn't like taking care of myself. And
Yeah.
that's also kind of what I mean is like I feel good, and it doesn't matter to me then if I've lost weight or not because I'm moving. So I'm getting like the endorphins and everything into my
Yeah.
brain through the workout. And so then I feel better about the space that I'm taking up within my body as well. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of being a couch potato. Literally.
Yeah.
It's literally just like you're just getting up and doing something. It's even like, you know, as someone who's gone through like very severe depressive episodes in the past, like you get into those moments where like you genuinely can't even get up to like brush your teeth or wash your face. Like it's hard. And like having somebody even just pull you out of the house for 5 minutes and go on a walk with you when you're really, really struggling makes you feel so much better. You're like, oh my god, maybe all I needed was some sunshine. Like, life still kind of sucks, but you know, it's kind of nicer out here. Maybe it's not too bad. So
Mm-hmm.
it's, I think that like the initial push of like taking action is hard for people, but once they're in the action, the act of doing what they wanted to, they're like, okay, I feel good.
Yeah. Do you have any techniques aside from like 3, 2, 1, go that works for you when you're feeling like you don't want to take action and move? Just for anybody who's feeling like that's not attainable for them when they're in a certain state.
I will say the 3, 2, 1, go does not work for me. I could
Okay.
say three, two,
Yeah.
one, go, and then just keep sitting. What works for me is motivating myself with like a little treat. So I give myself two options. Um, if I get up and do the thing I'm gonna do, then I get to reward myself, whether that's going out for lunch or whatever I want that week, you know? And if I don't, then I have to do a 2 mile run. I fucking hate running. If you know me, I hate fucking running. If I don't get up and do the shit I have to do, I have to do a 2 mile run. Like it is punishment. So I think giving myself like that reward versus punishment option, and I'm like, well, which one do you want, Danny? Do you want a little treat or you want to run 2 miles? I'm like, I'm getting my ass up and I'm gonna go do it. I think a little treat goes a long way,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I
And
think
how do you,
in and if you're not giving yourself some form of punishment, then like that's also kind of it's not going to do anything for you. You know, like you have to create something. Like if you're just like, oh well, if I don't do it, I don't get my treat. It's not that big of a deal. Well, if you don't do it, you don't get your treat, and you're running 2 miles, so it's kind of a big deal. You don't want to do that.
right. Yeah. How do you gauge what you give yourself as a treat?
I feel like I always want something different. So like if it's like me getting up in the morning, I usually want a cup of coffee. Um, so like if I'm having a day where I'm like, damn, I really don't want to get up. I just want to lay in bed and veg out all day, but I have to get up and work and stuff. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna make myself a fun little cup of coffee, but first I need to get up, I need to brush my teeth, I need to walk my dog, and I need to do a couple things, and then I get to have a cup of coffee. So it could even be as simple as like getting something at home, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and you make fun coffee too. What did you I just saw in your stories today you had like a strawberry cold foam or something that you put on your coffee today?
Yeah, I had an iced oat milk latte with strawberry cold foam. Who needs Starbucks when you could just be Danny?
Right? Well, and you get creative, right? So I think that's another cool way to reward yourself because then you're like, oh, I'm going to make this strawberry cold foam today, and I'm going
Yeah,
to get really fancy, and it makes that reward, even though you didn't go to Starbucks, like it just makes
right.
it that much more fun and satisfying because you made something fancy for yourself at home. So
Right, right. And if it's like bigger goals, you know, like for like the journal, for example, I like set a standard for myself. Like I need to do this for a month. If I do it every single day for a month, I get to reward myself with a new tattoo.
Mm.
So like kind of also
Love
setting
that.
like bigger goals for yourself. I think something that is lost upon all of us after we leave the education system is setting goals for ourselves. I feel like when we're in school, we're like, we have deadlines, we have this, we have that. And then when you like go out into the real world, you're like, well, dilly dally. And like
Yeah.
you have to sit like no one's gonna hold you accountable, no one's gonna discipline you, no one's gonna hold your hand and tell you, okay honey, get up, you I made you breakfast, baby, and time to brush your teeth. You're a grown ass person. You can ask for support, but you gotta get up and do that shit. Like you can't just sit there and expect somebody to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. And this could go down another rabbit hole that we won't go down, but it's like you have to remind yourself to take care of yourself the way you want someone else to take care of you,
Yes. And
right?
also if you're not taking care of you first, you can't take care of anything or anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a huge fact. That's something that I learned just in the last few years of like being single and not being in a relationship is like how much I've poured into other people and never into myself and never taking the time to not only make myself into somebody that I would want to date, but also to care for myself in the way that I want to be cared for and to care for others.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think that you just hit on something that's super important there. We probably won't have time to dive into that super deep, but there's a lot of power in that when you're like forced to go in and to do things for yourself. And again, that also goes back to like, how do I want to do things?
Yeah.
What am I motivated by? What excites me? How do I want to run my life? And then you just do it that way, right? And you start to care for yourself. You cook for yourself. You clean for yourself. Because I don't know about you, but cleaning my house, I hate doing it.
Oh, I
I would
love
be
cleaning. I
lying.
can't
I would
stand
be
cooking.
lying.
We need
Yeah,
to
I would
move
be
in
lying.
together. I will
I,
clean, you can cook. Okay, Vanessa, this is going to be a great
there
partnership.
we go. Perfect. Yep, let me pack my things. I'm on my way to Chicago right now. I'm on my way. But yeah, I mean, but I know that when I clean my house, that I feel more focused and more productive.
Right.
And so it's just, again, like little things like that. It feels like a micro shift. It takes a few hours to solidly clean your house, right? That's why it's not fun. But then when you do it, like, what are the things that help? Like, how does that help you to make all the micro shifts and all these other areas to get you to where you want to go?
Yeah. Well, I
Like,
feel
my
like,
mental health is also better when my house isn't covered in dust and all the things my dogs drag into the house, you know?
right, it's a clean space, it's a clean mind, it's organized, so you can kind of sit down and you can breathe instead of looking around and like being in like a, not your space, but like, for example, being in a hoarder space, like it's overstimulating, it's overwhelming. You're just like, oh my God, there's so much shit here. It's like when you go to the Goodwill and you're trying to find something and you're like, oh my God, I cannot do this.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it becomes too much. So like, definitely the little things and the micro shifts, like you clean your place, all of a sudden your kitchen is clean and you're like, you know what, I actually kind of want to bake something, and that makes your day better. Or you decide like you actually have space to paint now, or you want to go find some art, or like whatever the case may be. I feel like it definitely is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious too, how, switching the subject up just a little bit, but since you are in the cannabis industry, I know you're very passionate about that, and I want to make sure we have time to talk about that a little bit, but how does that tie in for you to all of this stuff that we're talking about, like into your mental health, into setting and hitting your own goals and creating balance for you? Because I know that it does.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about that and why you're so passionate about that?
um I'm also gonna preface on this one. A lot of people say that like cannabis is not addicting, and I do want to say that it is. I think you could get addicted to just about anything as a human being. And it's not that it's addicting in like a way that it's like super detrimental, like if you're doing very hard drugs. But I have noticed when I'm getting into a very big rut, which I was in the last couple months, I start self medicating and I consume a lot more cannabis than I normally do. And that's something that I've kind of noticed over time that I do. So when I see that happening, that's kind of when I'm like, okay, shit, I need to like pause, step back, take a moment, and see what the hell is going on. when I kind of pull back from that and I consume in a healthy way, I feel like cannabis changes a lot of different things for me. Like when I go to the gym, if I smoke before my workout, it helps with that mind to muscle connection, because a lot of the time, if I'm going into the gym, my mind's already going a million miles an hour. And then I'm there and I'm trying to focus on breathing. I'm trying to focus on muscle connection. I'm trying to focus on a million different things, form, and it's too much. So like smoking kind of brings that down for me. Um, there's times where like I wake up just absolutely horrendously not there in the mornings, and like I can't, I like have no creativity, I have no thought process going. And like, smoking different things with different terpenes will help me kind of get a little bit more excited for the day or get myself amped up. Like I do consume fairly regularly and like on almost everyday basis throughout the day, but it's like certain things help with certain things. Like I'll, if I'm having body aches and pains, I will typically not smoke. I'll just do like a topical or an edible because it's a little bit more helpful on the body. Um, if I find that I'm like, I really don't want to like sit down and journal or like do anything, like sometimes smoking really helps, and I'll sit down and I just like am able to kind of dump all my thoughts onto paper, or I have this desire to like sit and color, and it clears my head. It's like an act of meditating almost. So I feel like cannabis in a lot of different ways has helped me. Um, I think it also, like there's good and bad to everything, and that's, it's the same for cannabis. I think knowing what you're consuming and how you're consuming and why you're consuming is huge.
Yeah. And so again, this goes back to you knowing yourself and knowing how things work for you. But where would you recommend somebody start if they are like maybe they consume cannabis already, or maybe they don't and they want to start for various reasons? How could they get really clear on creating a process like that for them to work with them to make them better and not to just slow them down, I guess, and to create that like addiction thing that you can kind of go into with it.
Yeah, I think that as far as legal states go, because we obviously still have states that are working on the traditional market and not on a legal market. But as far as legal states go, like there's a lot of education within dispensaries. Like if you walk in and you're genuinely curious about what effects these terpenes have on your body, or your brain receptors or what have you, bud tenders are always willing to have those conversations. Like we want to educate, and that was a big part of like my job when I was a bud tender in Arizona, was like I would stand there and I would educate people, and then at the end of it they would just be like, oh, I just want the highest THC pre-roll. So it's like that's part of why I left the industry, but there's still that education in there. And because it's not federally legal, it's hard for the folks that are on the traditional market right now to get that kind of education. So, like, genuinely, like, reaching out to resources through like Instagram or TikTok or any social media, like people who are in the industry in legal markets, or even people who have just been on the traditional market for long enough to where they understand how things are cultivated and what happens behind the scenes. It's not just like a plant that you're smoking. Like going to the people that like are big in the industry would be like the best way to create that education. I think that anyone is able to fall down the slippery slope of like, oh, I'm consuming too much, and it's really just a matter of like you keeping yourself in check. Because no one's gonna keep you in check and be like, you're smoking too much weed or you're drinking too much alcohol. Like that's something you got to do for yourself. Like if you're going and drinking every day, or you're smoking all day every day, like something's got to give, and you're not getting your shit done. Something's got to give, right? Um, but if you're curious about like, I'm waking up nauseous, what's gonna help? Or like I have the worst back pain, or I'm having severe anxiety and PTSD. I'm waking up with like panic attacks. I don't know what to do. Like there's things that can help that. It's just a matter of like those resources, and those resources are so far and few with it being federally illegal.
Yeah. So if somebody did have specific questions, I know you just mentioned like reach out to, through Instagram or wherever, where do you recommend that they go to get the answers that they need if they're in a legal state?
To a dispensary. If they're in a legal state, always go to a dispensary. A lot of shops will have somebody who's like more on like the medical side of things, like getting people medical cards and helping them get their medical cards, and those folks are usually very, very educated in like all things cannabis because they're on that med side. Not to say that most bud tenders aren't, they are, but there are some people in the industry that like really take that as their niche. But if you're in a legal state and you go to a dispensary, ask for a bud tender to just give you the runaround on terpenes, what effects it's having on your cannabinoid system, how that's working. They would love to educate you. Like, we sit here and we read and we learn how to grow, and like that's a big part of the industry. A lot of people are in this industry because they're passionate about the plant and the quality of life that it provides.
Yeah, that's great. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, if they want to ask you about routines, cannabis, health, you also weight lift. I know you're going to get back into that. So if they have questions about any of that stuff, where would they get in contact with you?
So they could reach out to me on my Instagram. My Instagram is Danni. I think Vanessa will probably link that somewhere in the comments or the caption or somewhere. But even if you have questions on cannabis, whether you're in a legal state or a traditional market state, if you have questions on mental health, food, weird relationships with food, whatever it may be, I'm here to help. I'm not a professional, but I could always give my 2 cents on what worked for me and what I think could help.
Well, thank you for stopping in with us, Danni, and having this conversation. I know it was helpful to everybody who's listening because it felt like a very real conversation because it was just about like balance and just like owning your shit and figuring out what works for you. Yeah. And so, as everybody, wraps up this episode, I want you all to know like it's okay to feel lost or like you're not really sure where to go to get the things you need, but ask for help if you don't know the answers. Like, it's okay. It's okay to not know what things you like and what things you don't like. And that's part of the reason for this podcast. That's part of the reason why we're having this conversation. That's why my businesses exist. That's why Danni does what she does in the cannabis industry. And so no matter who you decide to reach out to somebody. There is absolutely no shame in asking for help, no matter what it is that you're working on. And that's kind of really what this comes down to. So thank you so much for stopping by and for hanging out with me and for having this conversation and helping others. I so appreciate it. And I love this conversation today.
Thanks for having me. It was so exciting. I'm so glad we got to catch up.
I know, me too. We'll do it again soon.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Rebel Rise podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and invite your friends to join us next week. This is your time. Now get out there and rise.